My brother didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. He was sitting at the kitchen table in the house we both grew up in, scrolling through something that apparently mattered more than the conversation he was about to have with me. My sister-in-law was standing by the counter, arms folded, wearing that expression she saves for when she's already decided how things are going to go and just needs someone to announce it. "We need your room," my brother said. "Kezia's pregnant. We've been over the numbers. It makes more sense for you to find your own place." That was it. No lead-up, no apology, not even the decency to put the phone down. I'd been living in my childhood home on Ellesmere Avenue in Scarborough since my mother passed 18 months earlier. I moved back to help settle her estate, deal with the property taxes, sort through 30 years of her life packed into closets and kitchen drawers. My brother hadn't helped with any of that. He was busy. He was always busy with things that weren't inconvenient. "We're thinking end of the month," my sister-in-law added. "That gives you 4 weeks." I looked at the envelope I'd brought with me. Plane tickets, 2 of them. I'd been planning to surprise them, a long weekend in Montreal. A thank you for letting me stay while I got back on my feet after everything with our mother. I set the envelope on the table quietly. Neither of them touched it. I picked up my coat from the chair, the good wool one I'd bought myself 2 years ago and never worn around them because it didn't fit the story they'd decided about me, and I walked out. I didn't slam the door. Slamming requires emotion. You're still hoping the other person will notice. I was past that. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway for a few minutes. It was February, and the kind of cold that makes the city feel skeletal, everything stripped back to iron and gray. I turned the heat up and just sat there. They thought they were doing me a favor with 4 weeks' notice. They thought I'd spend those 4 weeks scrambling, calling friends, scrolling Kijiji, maybe coming back and asking them to reconsider. They didn't know I'd already bought a condo in Leslieville 14 months ago. I hadn't told them. I hadn't told anyone in the family. When my mother was sick and the bills were coming in and my brother kept saying things like, "We're all stretched thin while booking a cottage in Muskoka for the summer," something in me went very quiet. Not sad quiet, calculating quiet. I stopped sharing information. It's a habit I picked up from my work. I'm a forensic accountant. I work primarily with the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, and with a handful of private firms when they suspect internal fraud. I find money people are trying to hide. I follow paper trails through shell companies and fictitious invoices and offshore accounts that someone thought were invisible. I am very good at it. Last year I billed $580,000. The year before, slightly less. The year before that, I was still figuring out how to charge what I was worth. My brother thought I fixed spreadsheets for a mid-size insurance company downtown. I let him think that. It was easier than explaining. And honestly, the less he knew, the less he'd ask for. I drove back to my condo, made tea and sat by the window watching the streetcar run along Queen Street. The city does this thing in February where the light comes in low and flat and everything looks a little like a photograph of itself. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt very, very awake. I pulled up my laptop. It was time to look at the numbers. Not my numbers. Theirs. My brother had been managing our mother's estate since she passed. He'd insisted on it. I was too busy with work and he had more flexibility. Those were his words. I let him do it partly because I was genuinely busy, partly because I wanted to see what he would do when no one was checking. I started with the estate account. My mother had left the house to both of us equally, along with a small portfolio of GSEs and a savings account. The house had been appraised. I knew the number. My brother had forwarded me a single-page summary back in the fall that I'd filed and hadn't looked at since. I looked at it now. Then I looked at it again. There was a legal fee listed that was 4 times what our estate lawyer had quoted. There was a property maintenance expense filed in October that I didn't recognize. And there was a disbursement dated November 12th. The same week I'd been in Calgary on a contract, for an amount that ate nearly half of the liquid assets. I'm not a dramatic person. Dramatic people telegraph what they're feeling, and I find that inefficient. But I sat back in my chair and I thought, he stole from our mother's estate. He stole from both of us. He stole from me while I was still sleeping under his roof and sorting through her sweaters and taking her cat to the vet and organizing her files. And then, having done all of that, he told me to leave. I didn't call him. I didn't send an angry text. I opened my professional suite and I started building a case. The legal fee was the first loose thread. I requested the actual invoice from the lawyer's office directly, citing my status as co-executor, a right I technically held but had never exercised. It came back the next morning. The fee was exactly what had been quoted. My brother had inflated it on the estate records by $6,200. That $6,200 had gone somewhere. I traced it. It went to a contractor who had done preliminary renovation work on the house in October, my childhood home, the one that was jointly owned by both of us. He had paid for renovations on our shared asset using estate funds, without telling me, presumably to increase the resale value before he pushed me out and sold it. The property maintenance expense from November was a deck. He put a new deck on the back of the house using money from our mother's savings account. I felt something cold and specific settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. Heartbreak is for when you didn't see it coming. This was recognition. The disbursement from November 12th was subtler. It had been recorded as an insurance payout reinvestment, plausible language, the kind of thing that slides past someone who isn't looking closely. But I am always looking closely. The receiving account wasn't an investment vehicle. It was a joint checking account in my brother and sister-in-law's names that I traced through a mortgage payment to a rental property they'd purchased in Hamilton. He hadn't just skimmed. He had used our mother's estate to fund a down payment on an income property. That is not a family misunderstanding. That is estate fraud. In Ontario, misappropriating estate funds is a breach of fiduciary duty and can carry criminal charges under the Criminal Code. I knew this because I had given expert testimony in 2 cases exactly like it. I needed to document everything before I moved, and I needed to do one more thing first. I called a colleague of mine, a trust and estate lawyer named Jill, someone I'd worked with on a fraud case in Vaughan 2 years earlier. I didn't tell him everything. I told him I was an executor on a jointly administered estate, and I had reason to believe the co-executor had made unauthorized disbursements. He asked if I wanted to pursue it formally. I said not yet. I said I needed a mechanism. Gilles listened. Then he said, "You want a forensic accounting report filed with the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. If there's wrongdoing, that triggers an investigation outside of your control. It becomes a matter of public record." I said yes. I said I also needed him to send a letter to my brother on behalf of Castellan Advisory Group, a conflict resolution firm that manages disputed estates. Make it sound like a neutral third party had been alerted. Don't mention me. He made the call. My brother responded within an hour and a half. The email Gilles forwarded me read like a man who was sweating through a shirt he'd thought looked fine that morning. He emphasized that all disbursements were standard estate administration and that any questions could be directed to the estate lawyer. Gilles replied asking for supporting receipts for all disbursements exceeding $500, as was standard in a contested estate review. He noted that Castellan Advisory was acting on behalf of a concerned beneficiary and was required to flag the inquiry to the OPGT if receipts were not provided within 5 business days. My brother called me that evening. He was using his reasonable voice, the one he uses when he's scared but trying not to show it. "Hey, did you get some letter from an advisory firm? About Mum's estate?" "I haven't checked my mail," I said. "Why?" "It's probably nothing. Just some. I think there might have been an administrative error in how I categorized a few things. I want to make sure everything's clean before anyone gets the wrong idea." "Okay," I said. "I might need a little time to pull the records together." "Sure," I said. "Take your time." I hung up and made another cup of tea. He spent the next 3 days trying to reverse 2 of the disbursements. I watched the estate account like a hawk. The deck contractor issued a partial refund, probably under pressure. The Hamilton mortgage payment was irreversible, which I expected. You can't unwind a real estate transaction in a week. On the 5th day, when Gilles' deadline arrived, my brother submitted a folder of receipts to Castellan Advisory. I reviewed every document. 2 of the receipts were altered. I could see the original amounts in the PDF metadata. He'd changed a $1,800 figure to $600 and a $3,400 figure to $1,100. He had submitted falsified financial documents to what he believed was a legitimate third-party estate mediator. That is fraud. That is evidence. I had everything I needed. Gilles booked a meeting. He told my brother that Castellan Advisory required an in-person session with both co-executors to resolve the discrepancies before proceeding. My brother asked if it was serious. Gilles said it was routine but necessary. He showed up at the downtown office building Gilles used for client meetings looking carefully casual. Jeans. A jacket that was slightly too new. My sister-in-law was with him, which I hadn't expected, but it didn't change anything. I was already in the room when they came in. My sister-in-law stopped in the doorway. My brother's face went through several things very quickly before settling into something that was trying to be neutral. "What is she doing here?" my sister-in-law said. "She's the other co-executor," Gilles said pleasantly, pulling out a chair. "Please sit down." I didn't say anything right away. I let them get settled. I let them pour themselves water from the carafe on the table. I had learned years ago that silence is the most effective Frizek tool available. People fill it, and what they fill it with tells you everything. My brother looked at me. "This is a misunderstanding, Gemma." I folded my hands on the table. "Walk me through the November disbursement." He started with the insurance reinvestment explanation. I let him talk. When he finished, I slid a document across the table. It was a mortgage statement for the Hamilton property. Cross-referenced with the estate account withdrawal. Cross-referenced with the timeline. He looked at it for a long moment. "That was going to be disclosed," he said. "It was a temporary loan. An advance against my share of the estate. Co-executors aren't permitted to loan estate funds to themselves without consent of all beneficiaries," I said, "especially not without documentation. Which there isn't any, because you didn't ask me." My sister-in-law said, "We are family." I looked at her. "Yes. And family doesn't file falsified receipts with a third-party mediator." I slid the second document across. The original PDF metadata printed cleanly. The original figures highlighted. The altered figures highlighted in a different color. The room was quiet except for the hum of the building's HVAC system. "Here's what's happened," I said. I kept my voice the way I keep it in every client meeting, flat and clear, no performance in it. "You misappropriated funds from the estate of Audrey Finch, our mother, including an unauthorized loan for a real estate investment and fraudulently inflated administrative expenses totaling approximately $31,000. You also submitted altered documents to a third-party representative, which constitutes a separate fraud." My brother was looking at the table. "I have filed a preliminary report with the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee," I continued. "That is not a threat. It has already been submitted. What I'm offering you right now is a choice about what happens next." My sister-in-law's voice had lost its certainty. "You wouldn't." "I already did," I said. "The question is whether the matter proceeds to a full investigation or whether we reach a resolution." I pulled out the final document. A deed transfer. Our mother's house. The one on Ellesmere Avenue, the one my brother had been renovating with estate funds, the one he planned to sell and split with me after he'd already taken his share twice over, transferring my brother's half-interest to me alone. "Sign this," I said, "and I withdraw the OPGT complaint. The Hamilton property is yours. Keep it. The deck is yours. Consider it an advance on your inheritance that's been settled. You repay the $6,200 in inflated legal fees into the estate account within 30 days, and we're done." My brother looked up at me for the first time in several minutes. He looked smaller than I'd expected. Not smaller than I wanted, just smaller. "You set all of this up. You set it up," I said. "I just read the paperwork." Jill slid the deed across with a pen. My brother picked it up. He read it slowly. He put it down. He picked up the pen. My sister-in-law said his name once, quietly, like a warning. He signed. I walked out of that office building and stood on King Street in the February cold and took one long breath that went all the way to the bottom of my lungs. The city was loud. A streetcar went past. Someone was eating a shawarma on the bench across the road and looking at their phone. Nothing had changed outside. Inside, something had clicked into place so cleanly, I almost didn't feel it happen. I had the house. I had the documentation. I had a record that would follow them if they ever tried this with anyone else. I didn't feel triumphant. Triumph is for games. This was more like finishing a long calculation and finding the number you expected. Satisfying in a way that's too quiet for anyone else to see. The movers went in 2 weeks later. I kept the deck. I replaced the horrible laminate my mother had been meaning to tear out for years. I repainted the kitchen the dark green she always wanted and never got around to. The house is on Ellesmere. It has a yard. The cat, who had been staying with me in Leslieville, now has a window seat and seems aggrieved that it took this long. My brother called once, 3 weeks after. He didn't say anything threatening. He just said he hoped we could eventually put this behind us. I told him I wished them well. I said it the way you say a thing you mean, precisely as little as it sounds. He hasn't called since. I rented the Leslieville condo to a PhD student at Ryerson. Nice woman, quiet, pays on time. I used the income to fund a bursary at my old high school for kids in financial hardship. I don't tell anyone that. Some things you keep because they're yours. Not to show anyone, not to use, just because you earned them, and you know what they cost, and that's enough. My mother used to say that the people who love you should make you feel larger, not smaller. She was right about most things. She was especially right about that. I scrolled to my brother's name in my contacts, then my sister-in-law's. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need a goodbye. I blocked them both, put my phone in my coat pocket, and went back inside to finish painting the kitchen. The green looks exactly right.